I wandered, lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. This is William Wordsworth's description of the daffodils, and this is romantic poetry. Pratyancha today introduces a playlist called Romantic Poets, and we are going to be today talking about the first romantic poet here, William Wordsworth. To introduce the romantic movement in poetry for you or in literature for you, well, the romantic movement in literature and in the intellectual arena, it emerged in 18th century Europe, rather at the end of the 18th century. Some people wish to say that when William Wordsworth published his book called Lyrical Ballads, which was co authored by his friend and fellow romantic Coleridge, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, that was in 1798, and some people think that that should be considered as the beginning of the romantic revival in English poetry. Now, the term romantic, a lot of us tend to think that the moment we say romantic, we mean a love or an emotion that is shared by a man and a woman, or a woman or a woman, or a man, but basically love between human beings. Well, in romantic literature, this term does not mean this. This could be one of the meanings of the term romantic, but largely it implies that the poet finalizes a theme, his muse, or something that he wishes to write for, to write towards, or to write to explain, and that particular thing he falls in love with. He romances that particular thing, and that kind of poetry is called romantic. Also, this era in English literature is characterized by poetry that takes nature as its themes, like I recited the daffodils to you in the beginning of the video. It also takes or celebrates the countryside, the idyllic, slow paced, beautiful life of the villagers. It also celebrates the beauty of women, and it celebrates love, of course. So, this romantic revival in English poetry was influenced by a lot of socio-political factors. If you look at the time period, like I said, 1798, now this is the time when the French Revolution has just been. 1788 to 1789 to 1799 is the era for the French Revolution. This is also when Industrial Revolution is at its peak in Europe. It's showing its effects on the society and the people. So romantic poetry comes to basically state that French Revolution, that was basically the age of enlightenment, that was when people wanted democracies instead of monarchies. Also, the scientific revolutions of the enlightenment were just behind us. We were discussing in the other video in metaphysical poetry that in the 16th century or the 17th century, these poets are constantly talking of scientific discoveries, and therefore their poetry carries these themes within them. Now, this is an England where romantic poetry is taking birth, and the poets no longer want to be speaking of science. They no longer want to be speaking of enlightenment or of exciting fervor in the minds of people towards revolution. Rather, they think that let's look at the beauty around us. Let's appreciate this wonderful world that we live in. And associated with that is one very important idea. Romantic poetry does not just deal with nature and say with the countryside, or like I said, the idyllic life of the country people. Also, it deals with some emotional issue that a poet wants to bring forth. For example, in Daffodils, Wordsworth is bringing forth solitude. For oft upon my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood. They flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. He says that when I'm alone now, and sometimes I'm in pensive mood, I'm thoughtful, at other times my mind is blank, but this beautiful vision that I saw of the golden daffodils fluttering and dancing in the breeze, it flashes upon my inward eye, and this is indeed is the bliss of solitude. This is the gift, the wonderful happiness of being alone. So here, the poet not only describes the theme, which is daffodils, and he's romancing them as he talks about them, but he also brings forth an emotional issue, an emotional thought, or an emotional characteristic of his own being into the poem. So that is also one character of romantic poetry. We'll be discussing William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge in the first generation. In the second generation, we had Keats and Shelley, and we'll be talking about these two young poets as well. So today, the poem that I bring to you is titled Upon Westminster Bridge. The poet with his sister is passing through London and it's early morning and he sees Westminster Bridge. And the scene is so beautiful, the nature and the way the city sits at that moment and the way the bridge spans the river Thames. He is driven to write poetry about it. So this particular piece is a sonnet. It's a sonnet, which means that it has 14 lines and it's written in the rhyme scheme of a sonnet. And also usually sonnets have 10 syllables per line. So this follows that particular rule of grammar and syntax. And this sonnet is devoted to the city of London and to the river Thames and of course to Westminster Bridge. So this is the piece of William Wordsworth that we shall be discussing here today. He says, "Earth has not anything to show more fair. Earth has not anything to show more fair." A lot of times, especially in the Indian context, when we use the term fair, we mean something which is light in complexion or someone who's very fair skinned. Well, the word fair in English poetry, especially in 17th, 18th century English poetry, basically means beautiful. Something which is very good to look at. And it is not surprising that this fair has a direct relationship to being fair in judgment or non-partisan, because that which is non-partisan is beautiful. So the word fair does not denote here beautiful complexion or light complexioned, but it basically denotes something which is very attractive, which is very beautiful. And here he says, he looks at Westminster Bridge upon the river Thames and the city of London, and the poet says that, is there anything in the world that is more beautiful than this? And he says, no. The entire earth does not have anything which is more beautiful than this sight. This is the line that he starts at. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. If someone passes by from here and does not stop to appreciate what he or she is seeing in front of the eyes, then that person has to be of dull demeanor. That person is really dull. He has absolutely no perceptive character. He has absolutely no perceptive ability because he is unable to see that there is a lovely thing of beauty, an unmatched thing of beauty in front of his eyes. And he or she would be just gone. Then the majesty of the city would remain unappreciated, but it is to the entire loss of the passerby who did not take 2 minutes or few minutes to stop there and to appreciate what great beauty lay before him or her. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning. The city at the moment is wearing the beauty of the morning like we wear clothes. The beauty of the morning is all upon the city, and there is a garment that the city seems to be wearing. And this is also a psychological manifestation of the feeling that if you really early morning try to go about in a city that you stay in, and you would realize that as if the entire city is wearing this beautiful garment of silence, this beautiful garment of maybe the cool morning breeze, or this garment of the soft sun rays as the sun just begins to rise on the horizon. So this is what he's saying here, that the city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning. Also, this sonnet is written really in praise of the urban environments that we occupy. A lot of poets, a lot of authors, literateurs feel that were it not for the city that they stayed in, were it not for the place they were born at and grew up in, they would not have become the poets or the wordsmiths that they are. For example, there is a book called Istanbul, and Orhan Pamuk writes his memoirs, the almost the autobiography of his life, and titles it Istanbul. This is the important role that the city plays in his life. So here again we see William Wordsworth really appreciating the fact that this is my London and it's so very beautiful. And he says, "This city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare." he's describing as if the city is wearing a garment, and then he goes on to describe this garment, the garment of silence, and he also uses the word bare. There is hardly anyone around. There is a lot of peace and tranquility right now that you can see along with the silence. So he says this is the beauty of the morning. Ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie upon unto the fields and to the sky. So he's seeing the entire city, and the silhouettes are very clear to him. He sees there are vessels maybe in the Thames, then there are towers, there are domes, and there are theatres and temples which lie onto open unto the fields, and then he sees the fields stretching from the river Thames and to the sky, and of course to the sky the towers and the domes are stretching to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Everything looks so beautiful in the smokeless air of the morning, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendor valley, rock, or hill. The sun in its first splendor, which means the rising sun, the sun which is just about coming from the horizon and rising up to shine upon the city. And he says that it is impossible that the sun got a more beautiful setting than the valley, rock, or hill that is available to it here. No other valley, no other rock, no other hill could be more beautiful than this city, which offers it a stage for it to shine in its glory. So the sun can never have a better context to shine forth, and this is what the city is giving it today. Never saw I, never felt a calm so deep. I never saw such a calm, and I never felt so happy looking at this tranquility, this peace of the morning. It brings me great happiness. The river glideth at its own sweet will. The river is gliding at its own sweet will. The Thames is flowing very beautifully, and there is no sort of violence in the way it flows, or nothing which is disturbing the tranquility of the night. It is just gliding past. It's just softly, smoothly flowing from underneath the bridge. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep. And he says, oh my dear God, this is such a beautiful, tranquil, sweet scene that the houses seem asleep to me, as if the houses also are sleeping. And all that mighty heart is lying still. All that mighty heart? This is the heart of London. London, the city which is coming into its own with the Industrial Revolution, which has all these mills and industries billowing smoke into the air and employing thousands of people, and there are migrants continuously coming into the city. The city is fighting to rev up its infrastructure. The city is fighting to provide housing. The city is really trying to transform itself into the modern city that we know of it as today. And therefore, he says that mighty heart, at least at this moment, is lying still. The word mighty carries a lot of weight here. Now see, here I'll tell you two or three things which you need to notice in this sonnet. The first thing is that, of course, it's a 14-line poem, and that's why a sonnet. But unlike some Shakespearean sonnets, the rhyme scheme here is A, B, B, A. Then it is C, D, D, C. Also, in the last line, the rhyme scheme would be E, F, because the last two lines don't completely rhyme with each other. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. So that is very important to note in this sonnet. Secondly, words such as glideth, which means it glides, or the city now doth. DOTH is a usage that was used in Old English, and basically it represents DOES, does, in present day English. And then also you need to notice that first he talks of garments and wearing, and then he talks of bearing. It is almost like he's speaking that the city is first dressing itself up and then also seems undressed to me. But actually it is basically to juxtapose the feeling that he has in his heart, that on one hand it appears to me that the city is wearing this cloak of silence, but on the other hand it seems completely bare to me because there is hardly any activity. So this is what he writes upon Westminster Bridge as he's passing by, and he can't fail to notice how beautiful his city London is, how wonderful and quiet and peacefully the Thames River is flowing by, and how beautifully the Westminster Bridge spans its banks. It is a poet's love letter to his beloved city. Upon Westminster Bridge by William Wordsworth. Please follow the Romantic playlist on the Pratyancha channel. We shall soon be bringing to you many other pieces from the Romantic movement in English literature. Thank you.